Part 1. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Jump down and it's all over. Tang Wan looked at the broadcast of the popular spicy chicken Sujiajia on the building opposite. He curled his lips, jumped up and jumped down. Her body was shattered in the dark night, and opposite was the bright lighthouse. Those lights have never favored her, nor will they take her out of the darkness out of pity for her. The overwhelming news headlines are the news of Sujiajia's death. Only in a small corner, Tang Wan's death is commemorated. And the malice that has never left her are most vividly reflected in her body. Although she is very annoying, I don't want her to die either. But she is really unpleasant and wants to grab everything. Jia is so cute, but she even bullies Jia on the set. Death, well, such a wicked person should not live in this world. She died to eliminate harm for the people. Letting others talk about right and wrong, Tang Wan has already jumped down, and it's all over, and he doesn't know anything about it. Xingshan Orphanage. In the corner of the room, a little girl wearing a yellowish-white dress suddenly woke up. Her eyes widened, she jumped up from the bed, ran to the mirror, and looked at herself getting smaller in front of her, with a somewhat panicked look in her eyes. On her chest, a crooked name was embroidered with black embroidery thread, which looked very ugly. Tang Wan. Tang Wan stretched out his hand and touched his face. Then he gave himself a hard slap. A crisp sound resounded in the room, causing the surrounding children to get further and further away from Tang Wan. How could she hit herself? Are you sick? Stay away from her, she is weird. Tang Wan listened to these familiar words, and the corners of his mouth curled up, showing an expression that looked like a smile but not a smile, like a cry but not a cry. What is this? Even if you want to die, even God won't do it? Tang Wan has known since he was a child that he was not a well-liked child. When I was a child, I couldn't speak a word due to psychological problems. There are too many children in the orphanage, and everyone is scrambling to show themselves to the families who come to adopt the children. Tang Wan is very good looking and has a delicate face at a young age. Many families want to adopt Tang Wan. It was only when they knew that Tang Wan could not speak due to psychological problems that they all gave up on her. As time went by, Tang Wan became more and more silent. People in Xingshan Orphanage came and went, but in the end she was the only one, growing up alone and boring here. Tang Wan still remembers that when he was a child, a director of a variety show found him because of his good looks. However, in the end, because he could not speak, he was replaced by Sujiajia, the daughter of the dean. Yes. Sujiajia. Tang Wan felt his fingertips getting cold when he thought of this. Tang Wan could not understand until her death why Sujiajia always disliked her. In her previous life, her already unlucky life was made even worse because of Sujiajia. She pinched her fingers and slowly tightened her bony hands. Since God allowed him to be reborn, is it because he can't stand it anymore? Want to change your way of living? Suddenly, there was a commotion at the entrance of the courtyard, and Tang Wan subconsciously looked out the window. It was a big car, and a man with a round belly got out of it. Tang Wan's eyes lit up and she recognized who he was. He is the director of the new dad program that changed his and Sujiajia's fate. She made a judgment almost instantly, turned around and started running outside. This time, just this time. She must seize this opportunity. She no longer wants to be like a fragile flower, a gust of wind that no one cares about, being wasted at will, and then dying alone. She just wants to live. Starting from the first step of being deprived of life, I want to take back my own life. However, at the moment Tang Wan turned around, her memories of her previous life also began to fade. In the end, she used all her strength to seize the last moment and emphasized one thing to her young self. Get out of here. To find your family. Tang Wan ran towards the stairs. She didn't know why she was running, but there was a thought in her mind that reminded her. Go quickly, go quickly. Hurry up and get your own opportunity. Run quickly. Suddenly, a staggering little fat man rolled down from the second floor. There was a bump sound, knocking down the weak Tangwan. Tangwan opened his eyes wide, looked at the dozen or so steps left, and fell face down to the ground. Tangwan was so frightened that she closed her eyes in fear, preparing to face the pain. But he still had no consciousness of leaving his body completely. He raised his thin arms to protect his head. However, the expected pain did not come, and she fell into a slightly deserted embrace. The embrace smelled of cedar, like the old papers Tangwan used on weekdays, which made her feel a little more stable. Be careful. Although the man's voice was full of displeasure, his move to help Tangwan up was very gentle. What should I do if I fall? Tangwan couldn't speak, so he could only look at the man in front of him with his big eyes, then tilted his head and made gestures with his hands. Thanks. The staff member with a work permit on the side saw this and took the initiative to translate for the man. Brother Lulin, she is saying thank you. Lulin paused for a moment, but soon he returned to normal. He stretched out a pair of big hands and rubbed Tangwan's head. Can't speak. Why? The staff only knew that this little girl couldn't speak, so they had no time to investigate why she couldn't speak, which would only increase their workload. But the Lulin in front of him was well known in the entertainment industry for having a bad temper. The staff did not dare not answer him, but only hemmed and hawed and rambled, none of which was on point. Lulin realized this, and there was a bit of anger between his eyebrows. He knew that the program team had made temporary changes because they didn't care about these children. As the only guest on the show new dad without children, Lulin came to get to know his partner in advance. At the beginning, they showed Lulin a picture of the little girl named Tangwan, and finally replaced it. It was replaced by a girl named Sujiajia. The reason why it can be replaced, the director team did not give themselves a definite answer. If you just can't speak, that's totally fine. They are originally doing charity programs, and children with disabilities are the ones who deserve more opportunities. Thinking of this, Lulin reached out his hand to pick up this well-behaved little girl. But I was thinking in my heart. Everyone sympathizes with the weak. For such a little brat, everyone will feel more pity for her than harshly. And as long as she behaves better and more people see her, someone will take her in. She won't be left in obscurity here. At this moment, a slightly reproachful voice sounded from behind the little girl, and even more panicked, Tangwan, why are you running around? Hearing this voice, Tangwan subconsciously shrank his shoulders, then turned around and saw the dean running over. His small hand pushed away Lulin's hand, and when he faced the chubby, kind-faced dean, he lowered his head skillfully and set his sights elsewhere. Looking extremely timid, Lulin raised his eyebrows, looking at the little boy who suddenly appeared strange, and then raised his eyes to look at the dean. If I remember correctly, the child they selected for this program seems to be the dean's daughter. This is really interesting. The staff looked at the scene in front of them and tried to smooth things over with a smile. Brother Lulin, this is the little girl's mother, the director of this orphanage. Lulin raised his eyes to look at the dean, then snorted coldly, but then talked about other topics. Don't you want to change someone? Let Guoyus change him, but I won't change him. A new book has been opened. Dear friends, please don't be stingy with your recommendation votes, monthly tickets, your messages, and gifts. These are really important to me, thank you. I love you, I wish you all a happy life and all the best. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 2. Chapter 2. What went wrong? After speaking, Lulin picked up the slightly resisting little kid in front of him and said in a voice that could not be refused, I want her. However, The face of the dean standing in front of him suddenly changed. He glanced at Tang Wan fiercely and opened his mouth, but she doesn't have a very good personality. She often bullies children and steals things. The dean became more and more enthusiastic as he spoke, and seemed quite convincing. Yes, she often steals things, doesn't like to be clean, and is not a good child. Don't look at her well-behaved appearance. In fact, many couples have thought about adopting her, but they refused to adopt her because of her bad behavior, and she was returned several times. Tang Wan lowered his head and held her tightly with both hands. She looked very angry, but also like a poor little talker who was slandered. She stretched out her hand and gestured, as if she was excited to defend herself. However, the dean's face was even more ugly, and he pretended not to see it. The staff next to me are also amateurs in sign language, so naturally they can't understand what Tang Wan is saying. Ah! Tang Wan opened his mouth, but in the end he could only blush and say this word. He is embarrassed and helpless. Lu Lin, who was holding her, felt her trembling and looked at the dean with a somewhat evil look. He held down the excited little cub with one hand, held her in his arms, and then asked, "What did she steal?" The words actually showed distrust of the dean. How could the dean think of what Tang Wan had stolen at this time? She could only turn her head, look around, and finally said with a hint of guilt, "It was just too much, and we almost don't remember it." Lu Lin sneered and winked at the staff beside him. "Okay, just do as I say. This kid is my partner for this issue. As for the other one, let's give it to Guo. Lu Lin is a good person and is usually arrogant. This is because he has such capital and does not need to make excuses with them. As for what they are thinking, can Lu Lin not understand? He just couldn't be bothered to say it. It is really disgusting for an adult to be mean to such a child. Lu Lin didn't bother to say anything to her, so he hugged Tang Wan and left, directly getting into the nanny's car. Tang Wan had no idea what had just happened, and was a little confused. But Tang Wan knew that the brother in front of him had no ill intentions toward him. Tang Wan looked at the agitated Lu Lin with her big eyes. She dug around in her dirty skirt and finally took out a melted chocolate. A pale little hand tightly grasped her only candy and struggled to pass it in front of Lu Lin. Because Lu Lin didn't respond to her movements for a long time, Tang Wan was a little anxious. She opened her small mouth and made a quick sound, "Ah! Ah!" Lu Lin glanced at the little cub, bent down, picked up the cheap chocolate in her hand, and asked, "Give it to me. But it seems that this is the only one you have." As soon as the belatedly fat director came in, he saw Lu Lin's posture, as if he was snatching chocolate from a little girl, and his expression suddenly changed. "Fat director, hey, my eldest young master, what are you doing? This little girl only has one chocolate, and you're trying to steal it." Hearing this, Lu Lin raised his eyebrows, and the smile at the corner of his mouth was particularly beautiful. He shook the chocolate in his hand and asked deliberately, "Just one? Give them all to me." "Ah," Tang Wan nodded. That little head moved so much that it looked like it was going to shake her head off. Lu Lin was amused by this silly look. To be honest, he actually doesn't like children. But the little girl in front of him made Lu Lin feel a natural liking for her. Perhaps it's because she is weak, or maybe she is too well behaved. Even if you are bullied, you can only say "ah." Like a poor little milk cat. As Lu Lin was thinking, he stretched out his hand, rubbed Tang Wan's head, and then said to the director on the side, "Okay, now that we have received the person, let's go. Won't we start shooting the day after tomorrow? Let's go buy some clothes for her first." When the fat director heard this, he subconsciously rubbed his eyes, then looked up at the sky to confirm that the sun did not rise from the west today. It's really strange. When did this young Master Lu, who has a higher vision than his parents, be so kind-hearted? However, when his eyes fell on Tang Wan, he felt that Mr. Lu's behavior was understandable. Nothing else, this kid named Tangwan is really good looking. Although she can't speak, her big grape-like eyes reveal all her thoughts, which is really cute. The fat director was so soft-hearted by Tangwan's eyes that he quickly asked someone to drive away. Just before leaving, he called the dean specifically and said earnestly, "You are in good luck. It is not easy to win the favor of this young Master Lu. He is very picky." The dean looked at the nanny car and his teeth were about to break. But he could only nod, with a smile on his face, and ask them to leave. Waiting for the sound of the car driving away, a girl walked out of another room. Unlike other children in the orphanage, the clothes on this child are obviously better than theirs. She wore an exquisite crystal tiara on her head, a pair of clean black leather shoes on her feet, and the princess dress on her body made her look like a princess. "It is Sujiajia." She ran to the dean's side, stretched out her arms to hug his waist, and asked in a low voice, "Mom, have they agreed to replace Tangwan?" Sujiajia said with a smile on her face. "According to what I experienced in my previous life, it is a certainty that Tangwan will be replaced. I just dressed up carefully this time and wasted a little time, so it shouldn't be a problem. That actor Lu has a misophobia. In my previous life, I walked in front of him wearing dirty clothes and was disliked by him for a long time. There should be no such thing as in the previous life. In this life, she will suppress all things that are detrimental to her identity. Let yourself stand at a higher position." However, in the next second, Dean Su squatted down with a strange expression, held Sujiajia in his arms, and then said hesitantly, "They signed the two of you. You and Tangwan are both going." "What?" Sujiajia's expression was distorted for a moment. She looked at Dean Su in a panic, hoping that Dean Su was just lying to herself. Then I heard Dean Su continue, "They said Tangwan followed the big star named Lu, and you followed the brother named Guo." Sujiajia held onto the beautiful princess dress with both hands, and her beautiful eyes looked a bit fierce. "What is the problem?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 3. Chapter 3. I'm holding your hand. On the other side, Lu Lin took his newly minted sister to the largest shopping mall in the town, put on sunglasses, a mask, and was fully armed, ready to go. These actions were actually a bit strange, but Tangwan just sat there obediently and watched Lu Lin do this. Lu Lin looked at her like this and put on a pair of sunglasses for her. Then he asked, "Would you like to wear the same sunglasses as me?" Tangwan slowly shook his head. "Huh? You don't want to wear the same sunglasses as me?" Lu Lin crouched down curiously, wanting to know what was going on in this little kid's head. Tangwan reached out his hand, took Lu Lin's hand, and jumped out of the car. Lu Lin looked at Tangwan with some confusion, but saw Tangwan move his hand and make a few gestures. The staff member next to me said in a vague manner, "She seems to be saying, she is holding your hand." After finishing speaking, he muttered softly, "I probably think of you, Teacher Lu, as someone with eye problems." This was the first time Lu Lin was treated like this, and he was a little curious. Then he saw Tangwan pulling him towards the mall. The staff wanted to step forward to stop him, but Lu Lin put his index finger between his lips, shh. He shook Tangwan's hand and said, "Then you have to hold it tightly." Tangwan could not speak, but slowly tightened his little hand and pulled one of Lu Lin's hands tightly, as if she was afraid that she would get lost with him. Lu Lin was originally going to take Tangwan to the most famous store in the mall to buy clothes, but Tangwan dragged Lu Lin to the first floor. Lu Lin raised his eyebrows, which were blocked by his sunglasses, and then asked, "Is there anyone selling clothes on the first floor?" Tangwan nodded without letting go of his hand, stepped forward with his short legs, and walked forward. This is the first time Lulin has come to the negative floor to buy things. Everything is a bit new to him. He looked everywhere, but what he saw were pirated clothes with big brand names but missing letters on arms and legs. Tang Wan picked up a pink short-sleeved shirt from the stall, made some gestures on himself, then raised one hand and shouted to the shopkeeper, "Ah!" The shop owner seemed to be an old acquaintance of Tang Wan. When he saw Tang Wan, he frowned, bent down and asked, "You are too young to wear this dress." Tang Wan's beautiful eyes rolled around, she pointed at Lulin beside her, and then raised the clothes in her hands. "You want to wear the same clothes as him?" Tang Wan's eyes lit up and he nodded excitedly. The shopkeeper glanced at Lulin and rolled his eyes with disdain. This man looks like he is rich, but he still has to pay Tang Wan. He is really stingy. I don't know how much Tang Wan picked up to save when he took out the 20 yuan. Lulin had no idea what the shopkeeper was thinking. He subconsciously wanted to stop the kid from buying this cheap-looking clothes, but stopped when Tang Wan took out two pieces. Two pieces of clothing, one big and one small, seemed to be hinting at something. Then she saw Tang Wan take out a large handful of crumpled change from the pocket of her dirty skirt and hand it to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper put it back into his bag without counting it. He also picked up a cheap-looking light green skirt from the stall and handed it to Tang Wan. He said, "Okay, you have come here so many times, sister will sell it to you cheaper and give you a skirt." Tang Wan's pale little face showed a little blush, and she looked a little embarrassed. He didn't reach out to pick it up, he just shook his head. The shop owner was a carefree girl, and she directly pushed the skirt into Tang Wan's hands. Then he looked at Lulin next to him with hesitant eyes. When he saw that they were about to leave, he made up his mind and said, "Hey, can you be nicer to her?" Lulin has a bad temper to begin with, and being treated with such an attitude is his limit not to get angry. Hearing the girl say this again, she seemed to realize something and waved to the staff not far from them. The staff trotted over, came to Lulin's side, and asked flatteringly, "Brother Lu, what are your orders?" Lulin pointed to the milk tea shop next to her, "Take her over and sit there. I'll be here in a minute." Looking at Lulin's back, Tang Wan obediently followed the staff member Xiao Zhang to the milk tea shop opposite, and then sat there without ordering anything, never taking her eyes off Lulin. After a long time, Lulin came back from the shop owner. Tang Wan jumped towards Lulin, carefully grabbed the corner of Lulin's clothes, and looked at Lulin with her beautiful eyes, which made his heart soften all of a sudden. He squatted down, looked at Tang Wan at eye level, and then asked, "Why don't you order milk tea?" Tang Wan shook his head and signaled that he would not drink. He just looked at Lulin nervously, like a stray little cat that finally found a roof to rely on. Lulin touched her head and then hugged Tang Wan. "But in my mind, I was thinking about what the shopkeeper just said. This girl Tang Wan is a bit unlucky. She may have a somewhat innate personality that pleases others as long as people want to adopt her, she will take the initiative to bring them to my place and buy them some small gifts. But every time, Tang Wan would be sent back. You don't know how difficult it is for her to save such a small amount of money. I don't know if it's really difficult to maintain a life in their orphanage. Every time Tang Wan wears rags, she goes everywhere to pick them up. Rubbish." Those old ladies felt sorry for Tang Wan, so they designated a small place for her to pick up, but even so, it's not easy for her to save 20 yuan. She took out a large handful of change and said with some melancholy, "It will probably take her more than a month to pick up garbage." Lulin was holding a plastic bag in his hand, which contained the clothes Tang Wan bought for himself. Upon seeing this, Xiao Zhang reached out his hand to take the plastic bag, but Lulin dodged it without leaving a trace. Lulin asked Tang Wan to choose a cup of milk tea, and then said, "Don't worry, I won't abandon you for no reason." Tang Wan's little hands grasped Lulin tightly, and her mouth was pursed tightly, looking like a kitten pretending to be serious. Then Lulin scratched his nose, "Let's go, I'll take you back to my house first. Hearing this, Xiaozhang looked at Tang Wan in surprise. He calls Niobe in his heart. That's okay. This little girl easily took down their most difficult prince. Tang Wan held the milk tea in her arms, looked at Lulin, opened her mouth and whispered ah. She wanted to say something, but couldn't. He could only remain silent, grabbing Lulin's clothes, as if grasping a hard-won life-saving straw. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is in a hurry, novice brother. Lulin kept his eyes on Tang Wan, paying attention to the changes in her eyes. Her eyes will be brighter when she meets those things that interest her. Looks cute. Especially well behaved. Xiaozhang sent Lulin and Tang Wan back to the villa, and then said, Brother Lu, I'm going to leave first. Lulin waved his hand, took Tang Wan with the other hand, and said to her, Come Tang Tang, say goodbye to this uncle. Tang Wan blinked her eyes, and it took her a while to realize that Lulin's Tang Tang was calling her. This is the first time someone has called her such a nice name. Tang Wan's pale little face was a little blusher. She took a deep breath and her eyes were bright, like two beautiful obsidians. Then he followed Lulin's example and waved. Xiaozhang looked at Tang Wan and felt like he was suddenly hit in the heart. Really, few children are as good looking as Tang Wan. Although the orphanage said she had bad conduct, in the past few hours, it seemed that this little cub was very sensible and cute. I didn't see many bad habits, but I thought she was too well behaved. After Xiaozhang left, Lulin took Tang Wan into his villa. This is the first time Tang Wan has seen such a big house. She looked at her dirty shoes and did not step on the clean carpet. Even Lulin pulled hard, but Tang Wan didn't move even a little bit. Lulin looked at the little boy who was staggering as he was dragging him. He could only squat down and asked, What's wrong? Tang Wan lowered his head, opened Lulin's palm with his small hands, and wrote dirty on it. Lulin didn't expect that this 5 or 6-year-old child could actually write such difficult characters. He raised his eyebrows, touched her head, then stood up, picked up a pair of adult slippers, and placed them in front of her. I didn't think it through properly. My assistant will bring you the things you need later, just make do with your clothes first. Tang Wan looked at the cute plush slippers under his feet, moved his toes, and felt the softness of the soles of his feet, feeling a little puzzled. Are these shoes considered a makeshift? My shoes are obviously very dirty and in bad condition. But those are my own shoes. Tang Wan feels that nothing he receives now is considered his own. She was like a little beggar who had strayed into a fairy tale world. What she saw before her was all mirror images, none of which were real. But the next second, Lulin picked up Tang Wan. Tang Wan felt Lulin's body temperature and tilted his head. Except for the good-looking brother in front of me, everything else is not real. Lulin saw Tang Wan looking at him, and he suddenly felt a little more satisfied than he was like an elder brother. Oddly enough, the young men who grew up with him did not have sisters. But he had no such feeling of pity. This little kid who couldn't speak suddenly hit his heart. Perhaps it was because of the bouncing figure, or maybe it was because she used the money she earned from picking up trash to buy herself what she thought was the best thing. Lulin felt proud. A sudden goo sound interrupted Lulin's thoughts. He looked down at Tang Wan, who was holding his stomach, and suddenly smiled, Hey, are you hungry? Brother will cook for you. He held Tang Wan in one hand and opened the refrigerator confidently. However, there was nothing in it except cola, a few green onions, and a few eggs. Lulin slammed the refrigerator shut and suddenly remembered that he couldn't cook at all. Just because Tang Wan's eyes looked at him as if he were looking at some majestic person, he suddenly lost himself. Thinking of this, Lulin scratched his hair in annoyance and said dryly, I forgot that there is nothing to eat at home, I will take you out to eat. However, Just as he was about to turn around, Tang Wan grabbed him by the collar. Tang Wan shook his head, pointed at the refrigerator, and then at himself. In a flash of lightning, Lu Lin seemed to understand what Tang Wan meant. "You mean, you can do it?" Lu Lin's voice was a little distorted. He looked Tang Wan up and down, and his tone was a little suspicious. "You, with your small arms and legs, can still stand on the stove?" Tang Wan didn't show any other expression because of Lu Lin's distrust. He just patted Lu Lin's arm and asked him to put him down. Then he stood on the ground and stood on tiptoes, trying to get the eggs and green onions. That look is really a bit pitiful and cute. Of course, Lu Lin was not a devil. He took the initiative to help Tang Wan take out the eggs and green onions. Then he saw Tang Wan go to the coffee table and take out the remaining pack of instant noodles. "Lu Lin. Good guy, you've just walked in for a while and you've already explored your living room thoroughly." Lu Lin watched the little guy running to the kitchen non-stop, but he still felt uneasy and followed her. Seeing her standing blankly in front of the stove, with her hands folded in front of her chest, she said somewhat shamelessly, "Look, I'd better ask my brother for help." Speaking, he walked to Tang Wan's side, helped her turn on the induction cooker and put the pot on. However, when he turned around, he saw that Tang Wan's eyes had been on the burning stove nearby, and he said angrily, "You are still young, it is not safe to use fire." Tang Wan nodded, stretched out his little hand to test the temperature on the pan, and then poured a little oil. Zay used his thin hands to skillfully crack the eggs and crack them in. With a sizzling sound, a circle of brown appeared on the edge of the egg, and the tempting taste awakened the taste buds. Lu Lin, who was standing aside to protect Tang Wan, saw that Tang Wan was doing a decent job, so he couldn't help but take out his cell phone and take a picture of her as a little adult. Sent to the family group. "Lu Lin, hee, look at my sister." "Dad Lu? We don't have any younger sisters in our family." "At Kitty wife, when did you give birth to a sister?" "Ulu, if you are sick, Luao, go and get treatment as soon as possible." Lu Lin was too lazy to watch the two couples arguing in the group, he just wanted to show off the sister he had just picked up. "Lu Lin, she can also cook. She cooked instant noodles for me. She is so good." After saying this, Lu Lin turned off his cell phone and continued to guard Tang Wan beside him, regardless of what others said. Tang Wan's body was small, with a head popping up, looking around on the table next to him, as if he was looking for something. Lu Lin hurriedly walked to her side, squatted down and asked, "What do you want?" Tang Wan seemed to realize that Lu Lin couldn't understand sign language, so he pointed to the faucet and then to his mouth. Her movements were very vivid and the examples she gave were very precise. Lu Lin immediately guessed what Tang Wan meant. "Are you asking about drinkable water?" Tang Wan nodded, with a blushing expression of embarrassment and a little bit of expectation on his well-behaved face. This look made Lu Lin's heart soften. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 5. Chapter 5. You are the best. Lu Lin reached out and rubbed Tang Wan's soft hair, and then said, "Then wait for me here. Don't jump off the stool. It's very dangerous. I'll get you some water." Tang Wan nodded and stood on the stool obediently, like a cute kitten. Lu Lin hurriedly turned around and ran to get water. In the process, Lu Lin felt for the first time that it was inconvenient to buy such a big house. Tang Wan stood on tiptoes, imitated Lu Lin's movements, stretched out her little hand, and touched the red button. With just a ding sound, the induction cooker that was running just now stopped working. But this voice startled Tang Wan. She opened her eyes wide and stared at the induction cooker, feeling that this thing was so magical. While Tang Wan was observing the induction cooker, a somewhat indifferent child's voice suddenly sounded behind her, interrupting Tang Wan's movements. "Who are you, Why are you at my uncle's house? Tang Wan was slightly startled when he heard this unfamiliar voice, and then slowly turned around. There was an 8 or 9-year-old boy standing at the door of the kitchen. The clothes he wore were the most expensive and neat ones in Tang Wan's limited experience. With an indifferent expression on his face, he looked like the little tiger with a bad face in the animal world shown on old TV. When Tang Wan heard what he said, he shook his hands nervously and fearfully, and began to sign in sign language, trying to explain why he was here. It was my eldest brother who brought me here. However, the boy in front of him did not know sign language, and his eyes looking at Tang Wan became increasingly unkind. He stretched out his hand to grab Tang Wan's hand, trying to pull her off the stool. Tang Wan remembered the last words of the elder brother named Lu Lin, telling him not to leave the stool, so he anxiously grabbed the edge of the marble tabletop and was unwilling to let go. He was shouting ah anxiously. Like a weak kitten that was bullied, it waved its paw, causing a little skin injury to the bad guy. This action is too dangerous. Tang Wan will fall down if he is not careful. Naturally, the child had no intention of hurting Tang Wan. Although his movements were quick and powerful, he still stood carefully in front of Tang Wan. In this way, even if Tang Wan fell, he would only fall on him. Body. Tang Wan was so anxious that she burst into tears. She didn't know why this little brother came to tease her. She only knew that many adults only liked obedient children. I have to listen to that big brother and stand here obediently and not run around. Otherwise, she will be thrown away. The garbage thrown on the ground and the garbage in the trash can are recycled by the recycler, but no one will recycle the garbage that has been thrown away. Tang Wan looks forward to the day when she can stay in the same house. Want to have a family, just like the dean and her daughter. She doesn't need a big room, she doesn't eat much, and she could even eat less. She just didn't want to be left alone again, and she didn't want to be alone. She wants to have a family. However, the little brother in front of him seemed to be destroying Tang Wan's wish, and he dragged Tang Wan back to reality. I want Tang Wan to leave this fairy tale-like world. Tang Wan bit her lip to prevent her crying from spilling out. No one likes a child who yells. She doesn't want to be a little kid that no one likes. She needs to be more sensible and well-behaved. This way someone will like you. But it really hurts and I'm so tired. Tang Wan felt like his hand was about to break. Her tears were falling down one by one, falling on the ground and on her clothes, forming a small water stain, which looked pitiful. Tang Wan was even more frightened because he couldn't see clearly. Finally, Tang Wan couldn't hold on any longer, and let go of the stone table with both hands. The light in his eyes suddenly dimmed, and he lost strength and let himself fall backwards. He fell. The little boy. Hiss. The little boy took a breath of cold air, but stretched out his hands to protect Tang Wan from falling to the ground. The little boy got up from the ground on his hands and knees. He dragged Tang Wan and wanted her to stand up. However, when he saw Tang Wan's face full of tears, he was stunned. You, don't cry. He stretched out his hand, took out a handkerchief from his pocket, and hurriedly wiped the tears on Tang Wan's face. Sighing while wiping. To be honest, in his whole life, he has never seen anyone who can just shed tears without making a sound. Those big eyes, looking like they were shedding tears, are really sad. At this moment, the little boy's body suddenly rose up, and he was lifted up like a little chicken. Lu Lin looked at Tang Wan, who was crying silently on the ground, then looked at the bad thing in his hand, frowned fiercely, and said in a bad tone, "You brat, who asked you to come to my house? Forget it if you come here, why don't you come to my place to bully the children?" As he spoke, he threw the naughty boy in his hand onto the big snake-shaped sofa aside, then squatted down and picked up the poor little boy who was crying so hard that he couldn't breathe. His tone was rare and gentle, and he had no patience for dealing with brats. "What's wrong? Brother Lu Zi bullied you. Can I help you beat him up?" Let's beat him together. Tang Wan wiped her tears, shook her head, pointed to the small stool next to her, patted Lu Lin's arm, and asked her to put herself on it. Lu Lin was a little confused, but he still did it. Tang Wan, who was standing on the stool, pointed at himself and then at the bench, looking a little clumsy. And Lu Lin understood Tang Wan's meaning by some mistake. She is saying that she is very good. I didn't run around, I just stayed on the small stool and didn't go anywhere. Lu Lin looked at Tang Wan with red eyes and felt that his already hard heart suddenly softened. Too well behaved. It's really good. He squatted down to be at Tang Wan's eye level, then stretched out his hand, carefully touched Tang Wan's hair, and said in a gentle voice, "Well, I know, you are the best behaved." Tang Wan's eyes lit up instantly, like a star, shining. Lu Zi, who got up from the sofa, was a little curious and a little surprised when he saw his uncle's liar to a child look. Then his eyes fell on the little girl who had been silent, and he tilted his head. To be honest, he has never had such a quiet peer around him. Looks like a scrawny stray cat, small and feels very fragile. Lu Zi moved his palms, thinking about the feeling of grabbing Tang Wan just now, and felt a little confused. It turns out that the little girl is so small. Tang Wan quickly recovered his emotions, took the water handed over by Lu Lin, tiptoed to turn on the induction cooker again, and started cooking instant noodles. Soon, the aroma of instant noodles spreads from the pot. Lu Zi, who had been hungry for a long time, had no time to think so much. All his thoughts were attracted by the instant noodles in Tang Wan's hand, and his stomach made a gurgling sound. The sound was so loud that it immediately attracted Lu Lin's attention. Lu Zi looked at his uncle, who ignored him and lowered his head in grievance. I feel a little guilty and a little sad. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 6. Chapter 6. This is a little lucky star. Tang Wan quickly cooked 3 bowls of instant noodles and brought them out. It's just obvious that Tang Wan is partial. Lu Zi stretched his neck and looked at his uncle's bowl, and then at his own bowl. All the pretended indifference disappeared, leaving only a child's temperament, and he muttered softly. My uncle is already such a big man, why do you still give him eggs? Tang Wan pretended not to hear, and slowly climbed onto the stool, dangling his short legs, which was really a bit clumsy. But she didn't ask for help, so she just lay on the stool and dangled her legs. Finally Lu Lin had enough of the excitement, picked up Tang Wan and put her on a stool, and the 3 of them started eating neatly. Tang Wan has never experienced such an embarrassing situation. Under normal circumstances, she would be like a transparent shadow in Xingxin orphanage. No one would care about her and no one would see her. What Tang Wan did most was to walk to the corner with his own small bowl and eat quietly. But Tang Wan knew clearly that she didn't hate this elder brother teasing her. He means no harm. Perhaps because he can't speak, Tang Wan is particularly sensitive to other people's feelings. Even with the little boy who grabbed her just now, Tang Wan didn't feel any disgust towards her from him. Thinking of this, Tang Wan lowered his head, used a fork-tipped spoon to turn the instant noodles in the bowl into circles, and carefully put them into his mouth without spilling any soup. Lu Lin looked at Tang Wan and felt as if he had forgotten something important. Just when he was about to remember, he saw a pair of chopsticks reaching towards his bowl across from him. Lu Lin rolled his eyes, picked up his chopsticks and knocked on Lu Zi's bowl, and said angrily, "Eat your own, why are you sticking your chopsticks into other people's bowls?" Lu Zi sniffed and said a little aggrievedly, "I don't have any fried eggs." Ha! Lu Lin exaggeratedly picked up his bowl, pulled the 2 fried eggs in the bowl onto the surface, and said ostentatiously, "Hey, Look, I have two. However, the next second, Lu Lin froze, as if he thought of something, and looked at Tang Wan beside him. Didn't you give yourself one? Tang Wan raised his head in confusion, stretched out his hand and shook it. She doesn't need it. She just needs to eat a little instant noodles. If she can stay here, she can eat less. She is easy to take care of. Lu Lin looked at Tang Wan and couldn't tell what he felt in his heart. It's like a hot heart soaked in sour plum juice. Sour and sweet. There is also a lingering bitterness. What on earth did that orphanage do to make such a young child know how to please others in order to survive? Just when Tang Wan was about to continue eating, a whole fried egg suddenly fell into her bowl. Tang Wan's eyes lit up slightly, and then she carefully divided the omelette into two halves. She raised her fork, struggled to put most of the fried egg in front of Lu Ziyi, opened her mouth, blushed, and said hastily, "Ah." Lu Ziyi blankly placed his bowl in front of Tang Wan and took the omelette, which didn't look very good. Then he ate it solemnly. Lu Lin raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw this. To be honest, he didn't expect that the little devil of the Lu family would take what was on Tang Wan's fork. You know, this brat dislikes his peers, let alone those who are younger than him. It would be a good look if he didn't hit anyone. But Lu Lin lowered his head and glanced at the well-behaved Tang Wan, and felt that it was normal for Lu Ziyi to behave like this. Who would not pity such a well-behaved and pitiful cub? The assistant standing at the door of the villa was holding large and small bags in his hands, followed by a huge truck, and the phone in his hand was about to explode. Ah, what is this ancestor doing? Why doesn't he answer the phone? Didn't he ask me to buy something? By the time the assistant came in, Lu Lin had already collapsed on the sofa after eating and drinking. He would definitely not eat these junk foods before. After all, the calories in these foods are too high. He is still a public figure and still needs some image management. The assistant is Lu Lin, who has been with him since his debut and has a good relationship with him. Looking at Lu Lin's lazy look, he said angrily, "Brother Lin, you took this kid away and didn't even say anything on VB." Lu Lin rolled his eyes, turned over, and picked up Tang Wan, who was watching anime, from the sofa and put him in his arms. He placed his chin on Tang Wan's head and rubbed it, as if sucking a cat. Finally, he slowly said, "Isn't this going to leave everyone in suspense? Besides, this Tang Tang is so cute, why don't I pick her up and stay at my house for 2 days?" Okay, okay, okay. What the assistant can do is to smooth over this ancestor's hair, otherwise he will be off and may really give up his job. The assistant just remembered that there was something else he hadn't said. It's funny to say that we are all dads, but you are the elder brother, Brother Lin. And because of your incident of robbing the child today, the program team is planning to advance the filming time. They will come tomorrow. When Lu Lin heard this, his brows furrowed tightly and he asked a little irritably, "Is it possible to change something that has been agreed upon at any time? This is really a child's play. Who are the investors?" The assistant hesitated to speak and looked at Lu Lin. Finally, he closed his eyes and said, "It's the Lu group." Lu Lin then turned on his phone and looked at the messages in the family group, only to realize that he had been tricked by them. He gritted his teeth and said angrily, "You are so old, and you are still doing such a little trick." As he spoke, he pointed to Lu Ziyi, who was sitting on the other side of the sofa. What should he do? The assistant touched the tip of the pen and said with some guilt, "Another new dad has been added. He is the young master of the Pei family. Pei Yunzhou." Lu Lin's heart was filled with anger. Who in the entertainment industry doesn't know that they and Pei Yunzhou hate each other, and they even specially invited Pei Yunzhou to watch their fun. Just when Lu Lin was about to lose his temper, Tang Wan, who was in his arms, suddenly reached out and touched Lu Lin's face with her cold hands. Then he opened his mouth and made a whoosh motion. It seems to be saying, "Don't be angry, Huff, the air is all gone." Lu Lin's anger was instantly extinguished by Tang Wan's actions. How can human cubs be so cute? The assistant thought he would hear Lu Lin's angry roar, but instead he saw Lu Lin just throwing Lu Ziyi into his arms with a bored expression. Then he waved his hand to himself and spoke angrily. Okay, okay, take this brat away quickly. When the assistant saw this, he looked at the little girl in Lu Lin's arms with shocked eyes. Good guy, good guy. I thought Xiao Zhang was exaggerating. Unexpectedly, I still spoke restrainedly. This is not the child that Brother Lin captured. This is obviously their little lucky star. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 7. Chapter 7. She saw Haruai. Tang Wan could sense that Lu Lin was in a bad mood. So she jumped off Lu Lin's body, ran to the kitchen, took out the fruit she had just discovered, washed it with water, and brought it to Lu Lin. The big red apple was washed very clean by Tang Wan, and her little hands were even touched with cold water, and the fingertips were glowing red. Seeing that Lu Lin didn't pick it up for a long time, Tang Wan pushed the apple in his hand anxiously. Ah! Give it to me. Lu Lin stretched out his hand and took the apple, but he couldn't remember where this apple came from. He had doubts in his heart, but he still took a bite of the apple. Looking at Tang Wan's bent eyes, he felt that his mood was much better. Tang Wan looked at the big apple and quietly hid his red hands behind his back. Then he swallowed a little. It smells so good. The fragrance of apples made Tang Wan a little eager, but she had always been able to restrain herself, so she just looked at Lu Lin expectantly, hoping that he would praise herself. Sure enough, Lu Lin did not disappoint Tang Wan. No matter how well Tang Wan hides her little thoughts, she is still only 5 or 6 years old, so there is no way she can deceive someone like Lu Lin. He could tell at a glance that Tang Wan also liked the apple, so he picked up the fruit knife on the table, split the apple into 2, and handed the side he had not bitten to Tang Wan. Let's eat together, I can't finish an apple. Tang Wan took the apple as if he had found a treasure, climbed onto the sofa carefully, and sat obediently next to Lu Lin. He held half of the apple in his hands and took a deep breath of the apple's aroma. Finally, I took a cautious bite. So sweet. With just one mouthful, Tang Wan's eyes widened slightly, looking like a cat's pupils that suddenly dilated. It was too cute to be true. Possibly because the atmosphere was so good, Tang Wan couldn't help but shake her short legs, looking very happy. The way Lu Lin looked at her, he became more and more suspicious of the Xingxin orphanage. How could such a well-behaved child steal things? How could she bully other children? A little kindness will get all her emotions, and a little sweetness will make her remember it for a long time. But after all, there are still people who are stingy and don't even give her any light. Even robbed her of the opportunity. Lu Lin subconsciously reached out and rubbed Tang Wan's head, but Tang Wan was stunned. The head is a little sticky, it's apple juice. But Tang Wan couldn't bear to part with this little bit of soft warmth, so he gently straightened his body up, hoping that the temperature would stay there a little longer. A little longer. This sweet dream makes me wake up later. Please. The two of them finished eating the apples and got ready to go to bed. Too many things happened today, making Tang Wan a little tired. But her spirit was extremely excited, and no matter what Lu Lin asked her to do, she did it obediently. Lu Lin packed all the daily necessities bought by his assistant in a child's suitcase, but Lu Lin had never done this kind of work before, and the arrangement was crooked and unseemly. In the end, Tang Wan came forward to help, put things into categories, and sorted out suitcases, one large and one small, before we were done. Lu Lin was a little ashamed. He wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead and walked into the bathroom with Tang Wan in his arms. He muttered in his mouth, "Okay, let's finish washing up and get ready for bed." Tang Wan, however, reached out and grabbed Lulin's clothes tightly and refused to let go. His little face was serious, and he looked a little scared. To be honest, how could she not be afraid when she suddenly came to such a strange place? Tang Wan looked at the huge pool in front of him, the bright lights above his head, and the expensive-looking equipment, and he huddled up awkwardly. Can I really use these things by myself? What should I do if it wears out? There is such a big pool. If you fall into it, you won't be able to get up, right? Just when Tang Wan was hesitant, Lulin helped bring a small basin and placed it in front of Tang Wan, saying, I didn't think carefully. I'll help you get the water. You are still young, how can you use so many things? Tang Wan stood obediently in the corner, memorizing Lulin's actions one by one, striving to be able to complete it alone next time. Soon, the small basin was filled with water. Lulin took out the children's toiletries that his assistant had just bought and placed them where Tang Wan could reach them. Then turn around and leave. Okay, if anything happens, just press this little duck. There will be an alarm sound inside. I will come to rescue you if I hear it. This is the first time Lulin has spoken in such a sticky voice, and it sounds very strange. If his fans saw it, they would be shocked. After all, who has ever seen Lulin's voice clamped? It would be a great joy if this old man didn't kick anyone. Although it was strange, Tang Wan nodded as usual and took the little duck from Lulin. Tang Wan didn't move until Lulin's figure completely disappeared from the bathroom. She took off her clothes, looked at her scarred body in the mirror in front of her, slowly walked into the warm basin, and then buried herself in it. The gentle water seemed to soothe the fatigue on Tang Wan's body. They stuck to the injured body, as if using the right temperature to make the pain dissipate. Tang Wan looked at the duck on the stool and blinked, feeling a little sore in his eyes. She wants to stay. This eldest brother named Lin is very good. He is so good that Tang Wan feels that it is a luxury to be by his side. For a dragster like me, you should stay away from him. If you bring bad luck to him, you will definitely feel more uncomfortable than if you left this world. Tang Wan buried his head in the basin and let the warm water spread his breath. The feeling of suffocation gradually made Tang Wan's mind clear. Her mind flashed back to the scene she had just spent with her two brothers, and she struggled to get up while shaking her hands. She has seen the sun. She saw the spring day. She doesn't want to die. At night, Tang Wan put on soft pajamas and lay on the soft bear, covered with a soft quilt, and slowly closed her eyes. She sincerely looked forward to tomorrow being another beautiful day. Happiness does not need to exceed today's, it is enough that she had it briefly. But Lulin, who was in the next room, subconsciously took out the cigarettes in his pocket and held one in his mouth, but did not light it. He clicked on the table and finally made a phone call. Special assistant, help me make an appointment with a psychiatrist. It's not me, I'm helping a child. Yes, I found signs of self-mutilation on her body. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 8. Chapter 8, A Gift to Tang Tang. The next day, when the sky was just bright, the dew on the branches fell from the mid-air and fell on the muddy ground, turning into cheap nutrients to decompose the yellow leaves that fell yesterday and welcome the next spring. Tang Wan opened his eyes suddenly and looked at the unfamiliar ceiling above his head, feeling his breathing shortness of breath. Then he immediately sat up, arranged the quilt on the bear, and then pressed the side of his face against the chubby bear. Finally, he arranged his clothes and walked to the bathroom with a pair of slippers. After cleaning herself up, Tang Wan put on long sleeves and trousers, tied herself into a crooked ponytail with her short hands, and staggered downstairs. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a red gift box placed on the railing opposite, with elegant writing on it. Gift to Tang Tang. This was the first time Tang Wan received such a formal gift. She was stunned for a moment, then stepped forward to open it. There was a tablet the size of Tang Wan's arm placed inside, with a specially customized pattern on the back. It is a colorful candy with the words Tang Tang's voice written on it. Tang Wan was unusually dazed. But it's not over yet. There is also a kitten crossbody bag in this gift box, which can just fit the tablet. Tang Wan carefully placed the tablet, then rushed to the kitchen, took out the bread from the refrigerator, heated it in a pan, and served it to the table. At the same time, the program team at the entrance of the villa is also ready to start live broadcast recording of the living conditions of these guests before departure. They held the keys given by assistant Lu Lin in their hands and were excited to open the door. Ah! Is this Brother Lin's mansion? Why isn't it a manor? This is just a place for Brother Lin to stay. The Lu family is very traditional and generally does not allow juniors to live outside for a long time. How do you understand so well? Do you know the Lu family? This fountain is so beautiful. Even such a small villa is not something we can afford. Wow, I have been working since the time of the first emperor and I can't even afford it. Brother Lin. Brother Lin. You haven't posted VB for half a year. The staff outside saw that the barrage was a little out of control, and quickly waved their hands to ask the host to quickly control the scene. The host was understanding, with an infectious smile on his face, and opened the door at once. However, there was only one bright yellow dumpling in the entire hall. She was holding a white porcelain plate in her hand and looked at the camera with some surprise. Then he stood on tiptoe quickly, put the white porcelain plate on the table, put the yellow hat on the back of his clothes on his head, covering his head and face, ran to the second floor and started knocking on the door. Rao is a seasoned host and was a little at a loss when he saw the scene in front of him. No one told themselves that the child that actor Lu captured from the orphanage was so cute. She can also make breakfast, my god. This is simply an angel. Not only the host thinks so, but also the audience in the live broadcast room thinks so. This kid is Brother Lin's partner, right? It's so cute, and it can also make breakfast. Her hat is also cute, she looks like Pikachu, right? There is a little tail behind the pointed ears on the head, which is really cute. Am I the only one who thinks she is rude? You don't even say hello when you see someone coming, and you run around in other people's homes. It's so uncultured. What kind of monster is upstairs? To be honest, I also thought the little girl was a bit rude and didn't say a word. There are all kinds of people in the world, most of them are different. But fortunately, Tang Wan couldn't see these malicious words. She was a little flustered and a little scared when she saw many strangers suddenly coming into the big house. Afraid that they would capture me. If they capture me, will I have to be away from that big brother named Lin for the rest of my life? She doesn't want to leave that big brother. So I rolled and crawled all the way to the second floor, not even caring about losing my plush slippers. Tang Wan was really in a hurry and accidentally slipped his bare feet on the blanket. With a plop sound, he hit the stairs and fell down hard. Hidden under the clothes, the body was screaming in pain everywhere, but Tang Wan had no intention to care about it. She got up with difficulty, biting her lip with tears in her eyes, and ran to the door of Lu Lin's room without saying a word. Finally she ran to the door, raised her hand, and knocked on the door hard, making a quick sound from her mouth. Ah! Ah! She was so anxious that sweat was all over her face. Why haven't you opened the door yet? Hurry up and open the door. Just when Tang Wan could hardly lift his hands, the door finally opened from the inside. Lu Lin, who looked tired, looked down in the direction of the sound and saw little doubting in front of him. He was in a daze, and when he turned on his phone, he realized that he had overslept. Hearing an urgent knock on the door, he quickly changed into his pajamas and rushed out. Lu Lin squatted down and subconsciously reached out to hug the little Dowden in front of him, but he saw her red eyes. What's wrong? Lu Lin's voice still had the hoarseness of just waking up. The equipment downstairs recorded his voice faithfully, surprising the audience in the live broadcast room. Is this voice Brother Lin? WC, will his voice be so gentle? Brother Lin, have you finally got the instructions for your throat? Wow, this old fan is so touched. Wake up, Brother Lin is not talking to us. Ha ha ha, cut it out, this will be the prompt sound when I can't solve the problem. Good guy. Sisters are so witty, please send me a copy. Thanks. Loud, I want it too. The live broadcast room was noisy, but the staff did not dare to say a word. Because, out of sight of them, the host saw actor Lu, who had always treated others with a bad face, picking up the little boy and glaring at him with great ferocity. Tang Wan felt this familiar embrace and immediately settled down. He stretched out his hand and grasped the hem of Lu Lin's clothes tightly with his small paws, then took out a tablet from his bag and wrote and drew on it. Soon, Tang Wan wrote what he wanted to say and raised it carefully. His whole face was hidden behind Ping Bei Eye, leaving only a pair of black grape-like eyes staring at Lu Lin. It is written in crooked characters. Will you send me away? Lu Lin raised his eyebrows, feeling that this little cub was smarter than he thought. He did not answer Tang Wan's question immediately. Instead, he looked straight into her eyes and asked, "Do you want to stay? Do you want to stay in this bright and sunny world? Want to hold my hand?" Tang's red eyes shed tears like pearls, and the fear and anxiety in her heart burst out at this moment. However, she grabbed Lu Lin's collar with her small hands and nodded vigorously. She wants to stay. Want to be here. I don't want to be abandoned again. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 9. Chapter 9, the Lu family can still afford to raise a child. Lu Lin wiped Tang Wan's tears, and then said, "Okay. Anyway, with the Lu family's financial resources, it's not like they can't afford to raise a child." Tang Wan's eyes quietly lit up when he heard Lu Lin's affirmative answer. Her little mouth was slightly open, looking very surprised, especially her speaking eyes, which suddenly lit up. Lu Lin couldn't hold back and picked up the kid. Then he saw the kid frown slightly and asked, "I just heard a thud. Did you fall?" Tang Wan lowered his head and did not dare to speak. She was afraid that if she admitted that she fell, Lu Lin would think she was stupid. So he lowered his head, feeling a little guilty. Lu Lin saw Tang Wan's appearance and touched Tang Wan's knee with his other hand. Seeing Tang Wan frown again, he knew that the little cub had fallen. "Hold her and walk down." The program team below was eager to watch. They had been waiting for Lu Lin for a long time and finally saw their protagonist. To be honest, everyone was sweating when they found out that this kid had gone to find Lu Lin. You should know that Lu Lin is famous for his bad temper, as well as his bad temper. I didn't expect this kid to be so brave. They were always paying attention to the movement above. Except for the "ah" sound from the little cub's mouth, they did not hear everything else. This was the first time that everyone saw such a gentle Lu Lin, and his slightly hoarse voice immediately hit everyone's heart. Just as the host was about to say hello to Lu Lin, he saw Lu Lin carrying the little kid and walking to the cabinet without looking back. He took out a medicine box, picked up the little kid with one hand, and gave her medicine. Different from those little who can't stay still, Tang Wan's main focus is silence. Even though the medicine was very painful on the wound, Tang Wan did not make a sound, but carefully tightened her clothes. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she was about to cry. Especially pitiful. The camera faithfully captured Tang Wan's face and her tearful eyes. "Don't tell me, this little kid is really good looking." Although she didn't say a word and was very rude, she was really good looking. A bit like a ragdoll cat. By appearance of the righteousness. Do you also like such an impolite little kid? But she is so quiet, much better than a naughty child. Tang Wan didn't know that the barrage was talking about her. She stretched out her little hand and grabbed Lu Lin's sleeve tightly, for fear that she would fall. This action also made some fans of Lu Lin break their defense. No, does this little brat know how expensive Brother Lin's clothes are? Can she afford to pay for being caught badly? Seeing this, Lu Lin nonchalantly carried Tang Wan around her body, straightened her clothes, and then raised her eyes to look at the host. Then he raised his eyelids slightly and greeted everyone with a lazy attitude, "Okay. Lu Lin is such a cold-blooded man. Damn it, he looks good even if he has a bad face." Lu Lin raised the Tang Wan in her hand and shook her little paws, as if to say hello to the audience in front of the camera, but in line with Lu Lin's expression, the movements of playing with the Tang Wan seemed like teasing a kitten. "Lu Lin, this is my partner. Her name is Tang Wan and she is a child from Xingxin orphanage." At this point, Lu Lin paused and shook Tang Wan. "Come, Tang Tang, say hello to all the uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters." Tang Wan's body was extremely stiff, but she realized that Lu Lin was standing next to her, as if she had gained confidence. She first clenched her two small hands into fists, as if to cheer herself up. Then he let go of his hand, took out a tablet computer that suited Tang Wan well from his satchel, and made gestures on it with his fingers. Then lifted up. "It says, hello." The audience and the host began to realize that something was wrong. They were a little nervous and a little guilty. Tang Wan didn't know what they were thinking. She thought that she couldn't embarrass Brother Lu Lin, so she tried her best to write the crooked handwriting beautifully. He was working hard, and the Pikachu hat on his head was casually put on by Lu Lin at some point. He looked dazed and very cute. After a while, Tang Wan raised his arm again and wrote, "My name is Tang Wan, the Tang of Begonia, the smiling one. I am the eldest brother's sister. I am 5 years old this year." Then he opened his mouth proudly and said "Ah," as if to say hello to everyone. Everyone felt a little bit in their hearts and felt very uncomfortable. Especially those viewers who said it was rude for Tang Wan not to speak. If there was a crack in the ground, they would definitely crawl into it on the spot. Damn it, what kind of devil am I? Wow, sorry. The person who just said that Tang Wan is rude will probably not be able to sleep tonight. She will get up and slap herself, and then shout in the bedroom, "I really deserve to die. I really deserve to die." Add 1. I really deserve to die. Add 10,086. But Lu Lin looked at Tang Wan with a strange look in his eyes. "I felt that I was right yesterday. This little kid is really smart. He is only 5 or 6 years old, but he can write a lot. Looks like a good candidate for reading." Lu Lin's cell phone kept ringing and never stopped. But he didn't look. Instead, he felt Tang Wan stretch out his hand and pull his collar, pointed at the table opposite, and said "Ah" in a low voice. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's wrong?" "Ah." Tang Wan was a little anxious. "The breakfast you made will be cold if you don't eat it." It doesn't matter if she eats it cold, Tang Wan is used to it anyway, but she wants to give her eldest brother the best. Breakfast should be eaten while it's hot. Lu Lin walked in the direction of Tang Wan's finger and saw the buttered toast on a white porcelain plate with a beautiful runny egg on top. The yolk was particularly crystal clear under the bright light. Very tempting. "Good guy, I call you good guy. Brother Lin is indeed Brother Lin. He actually let the children make breakfast for him. Tang Tang is so sensible." Of course, the people in the program team didn't eat breakfast, but they really couldn't ask the children to make breakfast for them, so they could only sit aside and watch Lu Lin eat with gusto, and it was so delicious. Lu Lin did not forget Tang Wan. While eating toast, he gave half of it to Tang Wan. Tang Wan shook his hand and made a small distance between his thumb and index finger. This cute look amused Lu Lin. He deliberately teased the child and said, "You only eat this little. Like a kitten." Tang Wan pouted, a little disapproving. Seeing Lu Lin amusing the children, the staff and spectators nearby turned their heads and looked blank. It's really quite enough, for such a big person, he still entertains children. They simply think Lu Lin is naive. I'm not envious of Lu Lin for having such a well-behaved child to play with. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Tang Tang, you are partial. A sudden goo sound interrupted the warmth inside. Tang Wan poked his head in Lu Lin's arms, revealing his two yellow hat ears, and looked in the direction of the sound. But I saw the host lady covering her belly, feeling a little embarrassed. Upon seeing this, Tang Wan jumped out of Lu Lin's arms and ran up to the second floor with his short legs, as if he was going to get something. As soon as Tang Wan ran away, the atmosphere became a little solemn. After all, Lu Lin was relatively relaxed and leisurely when Tang Wan was here, but once Tang Wan left, the ancestor looked like he didn't care about anyone. Fortunately, I didn't go to Tang Wan for too long this time. She was holding a plush blanket in her arms and was about to walk down from the second floor. But she was really a little too short, and the blanket almost covered her entire face, making her unable to see the road ahead clearly. So Tang Wan could only tentatively stretch out his foot and pull it in front of him to feel if there was a staircase in front of him. Then he quickly retracted his foot and stepped on it. Looks a bit like a turtle probe, cute and headless. Lu Lin, who was eating on the first floor, noticed at a glance that Tang Wan's move was dangerous, and hurried to the stairs, keeping his eyes on Tang Wan without making a sound to stop him. The host on the side saw that Lu Lin didn't seem worried about Tang Wan at all, and asked with some confusion, "Why don't you go up and remind her? This action is very dangerous and you can easily fall." The host thought that according to Lu Lin's temper outside, he would make some mocking remarks to himself, but unexpectedly, Lu Lin actually answered him. The attitude is quite peaceful. Lu Lin, is it because it's dangerous that she doesn't even try? That was very demotivating to her. The host was slightly startled. She was about to ask something, but she heard the people around her exclaimed, "Careful!" The danger still occurred. Tang Wan accidentally stepped on a step and slipped, and he was about to fall down. Even the host stood up subconsciously, stretched out his hand, and wanted to catch this sensible and well-behaved little cub. However, he did not expect that a gust of wind suddenly blew around him, and a figure rushed out. Tang Wan realized something was wrong when he missed the mark. She closed her eyes subconsciously, preparing to face the pain, but she fell into that deserted embrace again. I was saved by my big brother again. Tang Wan poked his head out from the blanket, his face flushed, and he looked a little embarrassed. But more than anything, I am actually happy. Just when everyone was breathing a sigh of relief, Lu Lin suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed Tang Wan's back collar, lifted her up, and shook her hand like a yellow chicken. The tone was completely different from the relaxed and comfortable tone just now, but rather serious. "Now you know how dangerous the stairs are, don't run so fast again. I picked you up on the stairs last time, and I will pick you up this time too, you have to remember." His serious look made everyone think that he was about to beat the child. The staff nearby had already prepared cameras and sprinting movements. If Lu Lin is ready to take action, they will rush forward and save Tang Wan. But the next second, Tang Wan blinked, then smiled, took out his tablet, and wrote on it, "The eldest brother is the most powerful." Lu Lin suddenly smiled when he saw Tang Wan trusting him with all his heart. The serious aura about him disappeared immediately. He reached out his hand and rubbed Tang Wan's soft and fluffy hair vigorously, then put her on the ground and said, "Forget it, It's better for the kid to be more active. I'm here anyway. The audience in the live broadcast room looked at him and wiped his eyes vigorously. Damn it! How could such a stinky person have such a sweet sister? Little cutie Tang Tang is really good at handling Brother Lin. When you smile, Brother Lin loses all his temper. Look at Brother Lin's worthless look, the main one is given away for free. I'm here anyway, what a mediocre and heroic statement. If my brother had told me this when I was a kid, I would literally take off on the spot. It's like a Thomas spin to my brother. Lu Lin watched helplessly as Tang Wan ran down the stairs like a yellow dumpling, then handed the small blanket in his hand to the host, and shouted "Ah" in a hurry. The host raised his head, glanced at Lu Lin cautiously, pointed at himself, and said somewhat flattered, "Is this for me?" Ah, seeing that the young lady didn't answer, Tang Wan stood up on tiptoes with great difficulty and put the small blanket in front of her. Lu Lin, who was still standing on the stairs, saw that the little boy was almost unsteady on his feet, and then he said, "If you don't hurry up, she will almost fall down." It's just that the words he said were a bit sour, as if he was jealous. The host quickly took the blanket from the little kid, waved to the camera, and laughed loudly. Did everyone see it? This is a gift given to me by Tang Tang. She held her face in her hands with a happy look on her face. How could there be such a cute little cub? It is simply a treasure in the world. Ha ha ha, if Sister Ping Ping looks back, she can see that the eyes of Brother Lin behind her are killing her. If looks could kill, Sister Ping Ping would definitely GG on the spot. Lu Lin, you'd better sleep with your eyes open tonight. Laughing to death, I never expected to see actor Lu showing such an expression one day. Ping Ping could see the barrage, but she didn't dare to turn around at all. Suddenly, a barrage with huge special effects appeared in the live broadcast room, which suddenly attracted everyone's attention. Pei Yun Zovi, show me Tang Tang. Pei Yun Zovi, Tang Tang is partial and only prepares eggs for you. Isn't this Mr. Pei himself upstairs? Probably not. I heard that Mr. Pei is also going to participate in the show. It should be a message from his little guest. When Lu Lin walked to Ping Ping, he naturally saw this barrage. But he didn't care. Ignore it directly. Then he picked up Tang Wan, shook the yellow Pikachu as if to show off, and looked at the camera provocatively. As if to say I have you or not. Pei Yunzo, who was watching the live broadcast with Lu Zi, burst out laughing. He poked the angry little boy sitting next to him and asked, "Does your brother-in-law like this little boy named Tang Wan so much?" Lu Zi hummed softly, moved his plump butt, and spoke reluctantly. "Tang Tang is just partial, she gives all the good things to my uncle, but she doesn't even give me an egg. Since when has young Master Lu ever been so wronged?" When I said this, my voice was filled with tears. He sniffed and looked at the screen, pitifully like a drowned puppy. End of this chapter.